It's June, and June is the perfect month for alliums. Now, one thing that surprises me is that most people only grow one, maybe two kinds of allium. But if you have a bunch of different kinds of allium, you can have them flowering for most of the summer. My last one actually flowers in September or October in my Zone 5 garden. But in this short video, I'm going to focus on alliums that bloom in June. You'll be surprised at the variety you can have. Many of these you won't even recognize as alliums. So the next time someone says to you, "Oh, I grow alliums," you can say to them, "Well, how many different kinds do you grow?" I probably grow 20 different kinds. There's a few kinds I would not grow, they're just too weedy. But this is one of my favorites, and it goes so nicely with the white gas plant. I love this combination, and I photograph it every year. Now let's have a closer look at each of these alliums.
What are alliums? Well, the alliums I'm going to talk about here are ornamental onions. And I grow all of these in my ornamental beds. A few of the ones I'm going to show you can be eaten, but I grow them for ornamental value. The star in the garden right now is globemaster. It has a huge bloom, and the flower heads can be as much as 5 inches across. It's a beautiful color. It's in bloom a long time, but as it's blooming, the leaves are dying back. And a lot of alliums do this, so the best place for these kind of alliums is in the middle of the bed or near the back. That way, as the leaves die back, you don't notice the ugliness. Once the flower is finished, it will make a seed head, and lots of people will spray paint these to add some extra color in the garden. Now, I've never done that, but I think that's a pretty good idea. The one thing that's great about globemaster is that it doesn't produce seeds, so it's never going to seed around. Now, that's a good thing and a bad thing. It means that it isn't going to get weedy, but it also doesn't multiply very quickly. And globemaster is a very desirable plant. Now, the white one that's in front of it is a white gas plant, and that's a plant you should also have. This is Mount Everest. The seed heads are 3 to 4 inches across, but they're on a very long stem, and mine flower at about 3.5 to 4 feet tall. It never produces seed either. After 10 years, I still have the same plants I started with. Again, these leaves die back, so I put it in the middle of the bed. This is one of the most popular alliums. It's called Purple Sensation. It blooms at about 3 feet tall. The flower heads are a little smaller than globemaster, but the color is much more intense. The problem with this plant is that it seeds around a lot. In the first few years, I thought this was a great garden plant. But now it's spread into a large clump, and I've been digging it out for the last 3 years. I'm going to get this out of the garden because it just seeds around too much for me. How about a very unusual looking allium called Ivory Queen? This plant flowers at about 6 inches high. The leaves are very wide, very non-allium-like. The flower heads are about 2 inches across and white. This is a great little plant that everybody should have in their rock garden. This is one of my absolute favorites. It's called christophii. It flowers at about 2.5 feet tall, but the flower heads are huge and they can reach 8 inches across. Now, when we're looking at allium flowers, we see these round balls, but those aren't really the flowers. That's a collection of flowers. Each individual flower is quite small, and in christophii you can very clearly see those individual flowers. This one does seed around a little bit, and I'm starting to find it in more spots in the garden. But it's such a great plant that I'm going to keep it. This is fistulosum. It blooms at about 2 feet tall with white-green flowers. What's unique about this plant are the stems. They're quite large and thick, completely hollow. This is a plant a lot of people do eat, but I see very little seeding, and the seedlings that do develop are right underneath the mother plant, so it doesn't really spread too far. Just enough little babies to give away to friends every few years. This is a new allium in my garden, and I grew it from seed. It's called Graceful Beauty. It's a smaller plant that only grows to about 8 inches tall. It has these nice white flowers. You may have trouble finding this one in a nursery, but give it a try. It's a really nice little plant. The leaves on this are more grass-like, and that's traditional for alliums. You might recognize this plant. It's chives. Well, sort of. It is a chive, but this one is a mini. It only grows to about 8 inches tall, flowers just like the larger plants, but I think it makes a much nicer plant in a rock garden. I also find that this mini seeds around a lot less than its larger cousin. Now, if you're interested in eating the chives, this plant really doesn't make a lot of sense because it's too small and doesn't make a lot of leaves. So you're better off with the regular one. And the regular chives is available in this pink color and also in a really nice white color. This is Allium atropurpureum. It flowers quite tall at about 2.5 feet, and it's the darkest colored allium I have. These leaves will again die back as the flowers are finished. By mid-July, this plant will be completely underground until next year. Here's another one of my favorites, and I have it in lots of different spots around the garden. It's called moly. It grows to about 8 inches tall. It has this unusual yellow color, and it has unusual leaves. They're quite wide. Many people who look at this plant have no idea it's an allium. Seeds around a little bit, but the babies stay close to the mother plant, so your clump gets a little bigger every year. I really don't find it spreading too much in the garden. This is the Victoria allium. A lot of people grow this for food, and I guess the whole plant is edible, but most people just eat the bulbs. It has a nice flower. It's kind of a white greenish color. The leaves are nice and wide. It makes an interesting plant in the garden, but by midsummer, these leaves will die back and it will go underground. Here's one last allium for you. Its common name is the Sicilian honey lily. It flowers at about 2 feet tall, and the flowers are very unusual, and they have an unusual color. Now, this plant has undergone a number of name changes. The genus name used to be called Nectaroscortum, but now they've renamed it as an allium, and it's called Allium siculum. I can pronounce that much easier. This is a plant I've been looking for a long time, and I finally got some bulbs from a friend of mine, and I've grown some from seed. And the seedlings look a little different than this plant. This one's quite dark red. My other ones are quite pale. But it's a very striking plant for the garden with big, wide strap leaves.